A powerful drug boss in Colombia named Jesus Morales wants more control over drug routes into the United States. So he hires a really good sniper called El Diablo to get rid of all his enemies. A DEA agent named Kate Estrada and Master Sergeant Brandon Beckett are sent to Colombia to catch El Diablo and bring drug kingpin Jesus Morales to justice. Will they be able to stop El Diablo and extradite Jesus Morales? The film begins with a drug dealer named Diego Paulo arriving at his luxury property in Colombia, which has armed guards stationed throughout. The guard was deployed to safeguard him, as he is known to have many enemies as a result of his illicit activities. Diego then walked into his room to speak with his fiancée. While he soaked, an unknown sniper prepared to shoot him from a distance. A bullet pierced his bedroom glass, killing Diego with the proper bullet lodging in his brain. Moving on to an American soldier's cemetery, a sniper named Brandon Beckett, who works in the military, attends the burial procession for one of his friends killed on the battlefield. After the funeral, Brandon met with his supervisor, Major Richard Miller, to discuss the murder case in Colombia involving a mysterious sniper. Soon after, Richard invites him to travel to the country and be assigned as a sniper expert in the investigation of the murders. Brandon then traveled to Bogota, Colombia, to meet with the murder investigation team. When Brandon arrives at a base, he encounters a male sergeant who oversees the investigation into the case. The sergeant stated that the case involved a well-known drug dealer called Jesus Morales, who was suspected of murdering numerous other drug dealers who had become his business rivals. After hearing the sergeant's explanation about him, Brandon examined all of the information. During the conference, Kate Estrada, a leader of the Drug Enforcement Administration, an American law enforcement body that handles drug crimes, stated that her members had examined Morales and learned that he resided in a house on a secluded farm far from the city. Estrada said that she and her troops needed to ambush that location the next day. The sergeant thought it was too soon, but she persuaded him they needed to act before Morales ran again. Estrada then asked Brandon to serve as a sniper, protecting her men from afar alongside Santiago, the man who would be his aide throughout the mission. The mission began the next day, and all squads converged on the area. Brandon and Santiago, who served as snipers, were already in the forest, allowing them to freely monitor the Estrada team's activities. On the other hand, the sergeant in the office appears to be monitoring the mission via satellite. Not shortly later, John Sampson, a special agent employed by the Department of Homeland Security, entered the room and began directing the mission at Morales' home. Returning to Estrada, whose forces were in the field, they appeared to have approached Morales' home. When all of the troops were in position, the first team began their ambush. Shortly after the first squad entered the residence, a bomb exploded, killing numerous unit members. On the other hand, a mysterious sniper has been spying on Estrada's forces from the forest and aiming for one of her closest allies, Pablo. Suddenly, a shot was fired, hitting Pablo in the leg and making him groan. Estrada, who found him injured, sought to help him and transport him to a safer location. Following the strange sniper's attack, Brandon and the others emerged from their hiding location to assess Pablo's condition. He recognized it was all a trap planned by Morales, and he concluded that the person who murdered Pablo was a competent sniper because he was able to fire 2 bullets at the target. At night, Santiago and Brandon headed to the DEA dormitory to relax while carrying out the job. While on their way to his room, they went up the building around the dormitory to protect themselves from a strange sniper. Meanwhile, Estrada appears to be still grieving over Pablo's murder on the mission as she heads to a nightclub to meet someone. However, as she entered the nightclub, a man abused her and she promptly beat him. Not long later, she met Carlos, who served as a secret informant and provided her with information about the gangsters, including Morales. According to Carlos, Morales hired a professional sniper known as El Diablo to assassinate all of his business rivals, allowing him to become the sole drug dealer in practically all of Colombia. El Diablo became much more motivated to kill Brandon after discovering that he prepared his weapon. Brandon has also identified the target he will fire thanks to Santiago's directions. They shot each other with the precision of trained snipers. The following day, Brandon, Estrada, and the sergeant held a video conference with Richard, Brandon's supervisor. Richard revealed that El Diablo employed a type of smart bullet with advanced technology that could turn and detonate autonomously based on the sniper's commands. Meanwhile, Morales was at his headquarters with some Bogota City thugs playing billiards. When Morales loses a pool game bet, he points his gun at one of the gang leaders, Manolo, who wins the game, frightening him. On the other hand, another thug named Victor appeared terrified by Morales' actions, although Morales did not press the trigger of his gun and claimed to be joking. Morales fled shortly after one of his men reported that Brandon and Estrada were still alive. While on his way to his room, he attempts to call El Diablo. When he arrived, El Diablo was sitting there, pointing a gun at Morales, who had yet to pay him. A few moments later, Estrada received a call from Carlos, who provided her with the address of El Diablo's girlfriend, so they immediately went there. On the way, a truck collided with their automobile at an intersection. Unfortunately, Santiago perished in the encounter after being struck by a bullet fired by Morales' men. Meanwhile, Estrada proceeded alone to El Diablo's girlfriend's home without informing Brandon, who was still struggling with attacks. When Estrada gets to Diablo's girlfriend's house, she is challenged by Manolo and his guys for attempting to force her way inside. Estrada, who was surrounded, attempted to fight the assailants, but was eventually cornered. Fortunately, Brandon arrived to help her, and they discovered and retrieved El Diablo's girlfriend's necklace, which had El Diablo's photograph. Brandon, who had gotten the photograph, immediately sent it to the sergeant and Samson, who were in the office trying to identify the unusual sharpshooter. Brandon stated in that phone call that he and Estrada would briefly conceal while gathering further information about El Diablo, and he requested that the sergeant not send other troops to join the mission so that their movements would be difficult to trace. Brandon and Estrada meet Carlos to determine who in the government department is assisting Morales. Unfortunately, he has no awareness of this. However, he informed them that certain key government officials may have supported Morales in facilitating the narcotics buying and selling that Morales was engaging in. Based on Carlos's intelligence, Richard and the sergeant, on the other hand, had no reservations about their actions because they believed it was effective enough to pull Morales out of hiding. Morales, who learned his business partner had been murdered by Brandon and Estrada, promptly contacted El Diablo and paid the sniper to kill them that night. Without hesitation, El Diablo went to Manolo for information and begged him for assistance so that thugs in the neighborhood might help the mission. Manolo is willing to do it because he has already gotten some money, and he informs Brandon and Estrada that they have worked with Carlos to carry out all of their deeds. Knowing this, El Diablo instructed Manolo to hang Carlos in front of the church. Meanwhile, he hid around the church, waiting for Brandon and Estrada to emerge from hiding. Estrada worried when she saw Carlos hanging from a tree and decided to come out to save him. However, Brandon stopped her and told her it was a trap, and if she came out, she would be killed by El Diablo or Morales' men. Brandon convinced Estrada that they could save Carlos from where they are currently. The following day, Brandon and Estrada were seen attending Carlos' funeral with locals who were heartbroken by his loss. At that moment, Brandon saw Victor's suspicious moves and decided to pursue the goons. Despite his initial reluctance, Victor eventually agreed to join Brandon and tell Morales' headquarters because Morales had slain Carlos. DEA troops promptly ambushed Morales' headquarters, and Samson took him to Miami shortly after his arrest for trial at the United States Attorney's Office. El Diablo, on the other hand, lands in Miami with a fake identity and gets through airport security. Meanwhile, Brandon and his forces were preparing at the airport to transport Morales to the prosecutor's office. Brandon visited with Richard at the time, and he showed him the most recent military smart bullet, and discover El Diablo was a former soldier who had worked for the U.S. Department of Defense. El Diablo also booked into an airport hotel. He began preparing his sniper gear for a kill. Meanwhile, Morales has been spotted sporting a hoodie. Numerous cops escorted him from a room to a car that would transport him to the prosecutor's office. He stated that Morales, who was with the first convoy of cars, was someone else, and that the actual Morales would be transported in a white van that would depart shortly. El Diablo was assigned by someone in the government to assassinate Morales before he spread information on government officials who had assisted him in running his illegal drug enterprise. Brandon and Estrada were standing beside the El Diablo building. Estrada witnessed the first convoy of cars taking Morales. Meanwhile, Brandon tried to aim his rifle at El Diablo. When El Diablo received a text message on his phone informing him of Morales' location in the white van, he immediately altered his shooting target and waited for the van to leave the airport. When he saw a white van pull out, he shot it to pieces. At the same time, several shooters exited the van and opened fire on the occupants, ensuring that all were dead. Brandon, who had gotten El Diablo's coordinates, however, shot right away using the smart bullet that Richard had earlier given him. The shot eventually hit El Diablo's head, killing him instantly. Morales was in the first convoy of cars, so he survived the incident. Meanwhile, El Diablo's white van was empty since it was remote-controlled. Brandon and the others planned a plan to expose Sampson's crimes, who had cooperated with Morales in the drug trade, and ordered El Diablo to murder Morales to keep him from being involved in the drug case. Estrada, who had lost her best co-worker, became enraged when she heard Sampson's explanation, in which he appeared unconcerned about his actions. After Sampson is arrested at the end of the film, Richard compliments Brandon and Estrada on their efforts to solve the case.